I'm finally back with part 3 of Justin Baldoni versus Blake Lively. My regular crew knows that I don't get to do this full time. As much as I wish I could, I can't. So I apologize to all the new subs here that I don't get to put these out as quickly as I wish that I could, and ask for your patience. This episode is part of a series. I will link the previous 2 parts in comments, and later I will come back and also link any future episodes. So if you go to the playlist version, you can find all of the videos in this specific topic all grouped together in one playlist. So far, what we've covered in the first pages of this document is how the relationship between Justin and Blake drastically took a turn after the SAG-AFTRA strike. We saw communication between the two of them, very friendly. Then we saw that during the strike, Blake had requested and was denied access to the daily films. She was also upset about Justin not being crazy about her rewrite for the rooftop scene. We'll see even more of the communication between the two of them in the exhibit that was filed with this case that we'll consider once we've completed this complaint. But we saw enough in the complaint to see that in fact everything seemed friendly until that point. We've also covered how wardrobe had already shopped for the character Lily Bloom, and the first step Blake took in taking control of this movie was forcing a reshop according to the clothes that she liked. We saw that Sony wasn't pleased with the first glimpses of her wardrobe and asked Justin to rearrange it. When he had to speak to her about this, we saw that she wasn't pleased with it and wrote extensive texts to him after the conversation in order to try to keep control of the wardrobe. We also know that in her complaint, she uses this conversation against him. So it does seem to be a pattern that each time he doesn't comply with her wishes or tells her no, there seems to be a kind of strike back from Blake that she often brings her husband Ryan Reynolds into. And that when she came back after the strike, she brought this 17-point document for things she was demanding in order to continue the filming. We're picking up with point 7 today. So let's get started. Legal documents are carefully crafted by attorneys after days or even weeks of research. They're often looked at as boring, monotonous, or even confusing with their specialized legal terms. But inside each one is a story built on a client and the history of similar cases to support that client's story. I can get lost in these stories, reading every citation, analyzing the attorney's point of view, meditating on every word to try to reconstruct what happened, find the truth, and above all, watch as hopefully justice is served. I'm Cassidy O'Connell. If you're looking for all of the details of the story and not just salacious tidbits, then you've found a home here. This is the other 55%. Because we don't know the half of it. Justin Baldoni versus Blake Lively. How Blake Lively stole the show. Welcome. We left off at point 7. No filming nude or sex scenes except per nudity writer, and no use of prior nude scenes without nudity writer. It's really hard not to jump into his exhibit with this complaint. It is a beautifully laid out timeline that has so many receipts that accompany this complaint. But since they don't line up exactly, I'm doing this separately so that there aren't any missed points. But you will see more documentation of these events that we're discussing when we get to that file. Fortunately, he did provide some of the more important pieces of evidence throughout this complaint. Now, under this subheading, there's a part that you might find a little shocking. It really shocked me because it's not just about this nudity writer, but it's about what comes up with this discussion. So first of all, this point makes it seem like they've been filming without this nudity writer in place and that it's somehow the fault of production. That here's the situation that she must make this demand to make this happen. But he points out in this complaint that she was in fact provided a nudity writer. Now we saw in the previous episodes that she also had made it seem that there wasn't an intimacy coordinator. But we saw the conversations between Justin and Blake. Justin forwarded that conversation to a producer because he was concerned about it, because Justin was trying to get them together ahead of filming to discuss these scenes because he didn't want anyone to feel uncomfortable. Blake said, "Oh, I'll meet her at filming." The producer said that's okay if that's what she wants. But then we also saw that Justin shared those notes with her from the intimacy coordinator, but Blake preferred to rewrite the whole scenes her own way. She also then apparently directed them her own way.
So talk to me about how sometimes you were even the intimacy coordinator in some of those sexier scenes, like we saw you.
That shouldn't be happening, by the way.
The same woman who refused to use the intimacy coordinator that was provided to her, and you'll see a lot more scenes very similar, bullying her way into being the director to the actual director and choreographing her own intimate scenes instead of taking direction from the intimacy coordinator. And then in the interview, she dares to speak out against this when she's the one who created this situation in the film. And that's well documented. But imagine if this were the other way around, him grabbing her in this aggressive manner, what she would have to say. And she goes very quickly from running this interview to, when she hears that there's footage of it out there, because she knows that footage goes against her narrative.
I just want to be clear that you should not be the intimacy coordinator. You should definitely hire intimacy coordinators, which we did have. Thank goodness.
You were teaching Justin how to pull you in.
Where have you seen this?
I actually just saw it too. It was on Instagram yesterday, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, romance is really important. You're supposed to...
But back to this nudity writer. So they have the nudity writer. It was approved by the intimacy coordinator that Justin hired. It was given to Blake. There were conversations held, and they are part of the record, where Justin's attorneys were speaking to Blake's attorneys, trying to get her to sign the nudity writer and to add her own personal notes to it. Not only did she not sign this, she never even signed her employment agreement. That's the part that I found so shocking. If you have an actor that never signed the contract for their role that they played, they are not legally bound to the production. They can walk away without facing any repercussions at all. And from the opposite standpoint, they're not guaranteed payment. There's really, just like it sounds, there's no contract. This doesn't protect either side. So what do they do to protect themselves? Sometimes a contract has a lot of parts and does take an extended amount of time to get signed. So in the meantime, there's something he refers to as the COE, or Certificate of Engagement. This is a bare minimum, and it's a protection for copyright. So in lieu of the contract that would cover all of this, you can use this more simple document. Because when you're an actor in a movie, it's your face, it's your body, it's your voice, but your actions in that role do not belong to you. They are part of the copyright of the production company. If you wanted to reprise that role somehow outside of the movie, you would need the studio or production company's permission, because they now own all that. So this is the very least that they need to protect themselves and protect their copyright. Since they were waiting for her contract to be signed, they send this. It's approved by Blake's counsel, but production never receives a signed copy. So this woman is here terrorizing the whole crew. She doesn't have a contract. She doesn't even have the COE. It's crazy. And in the notes of this one, we have the dates that these things were delivered, the deadlines they gave them to have them signed. The date of a response came the day after the deadline, and at that point it still wasn't signed. They said that they were reviewing it and that they would come back with their notes, when at this point it was already supposed to have been signed and submitted. What was their focus? Blake wanted her fee deposited in escrow. And we have one of the exhibits here, which is an email between Wayfarer's counsel and Blake's counsel. They tell them that escrow is made in good faith, but we still don't have a signed COE. And look, it's almost 2 months. They also don't have the SAG start paperwork. That's been outstanding for over a month. The other point they take issue with is that this nudity writer was retroactive to scenes that had already been filmed, even though no simulated sex had even been filmed yet, and there was a simulated nudity piece that had been filmed, but that Blake is the one who wrote it, knew when it was going to be filmed, and directed it herself. And this happened while the nudity writer was in her possession, unsigned, no notes given on it, and she had turned down using the intimacy coordinator. Point 8 is a quick one. She asked to have a personal representative on the set. They have no objection. Point 9 is about COVID-19 exposure. But looking at the dates, all of the mandated testing, mask requirements, all of the COVID protocols had expired already. But even so, they agreed to inform her if she was exposed to COVID. Point 10 was a demand that there be no retaliation for her making these requests. The response was that Wayfarer had no interest in retaliating against her, and we see that to the end, even after filming was all wrapped up and Justin was in interviews, he never said a bad word about her publicly.
This is your night, mister.
No, this isn't my night. This is a night for all the women who we made this movie for. This is a night for Blake. This is a night for Colleen. I'm just so grateful that we're here. 5 years in the making. Mine isn't so much about the work that went into it, but about the why behind it. If a Lily Bloom in real life can sit in this theater and maybe make a different choice for herself than was made for her, maybe she sees herself on that screen and chooses something different for herself. That's why I made the movie.
But he notes at the bottom of that paragraph that it became clear that Blake would consider any effort to push back against her demands became, in her mind, retaliation. We already saw that though she was hired as an executive producer and an actress, she appointed herself as wardrobe, also began to rewrite things and direct things.
Would show up on a set, I knew that they just wanted me to show up and look cute and stand on a little pink sticker where I'm supposed to go and say what I'm supposed to say, but I also knew that that wasn't fulfilling for me, that I wanted to be a part of the storytelling. That I wanted to be a part of the narrative. Sometimes I would have people who really resented that because they were like, we just hired you to be an actor. Yet when I went in the meetings, I would just seem like I'm just there to be the actor and ready to get the gig. I wouldn't reveal that I actually need to have authorship in order to feel fulfilled. So I think that for them, sometimes that might have felt like a rug pull because you're like, you're trying to assert yourself into something that we didn't hire you to do. And so it was a really strange position to be in.
So anytime they refused to allow her to do these things, he says she claimed this was that retaliation, and so that he felt that this point was put in there simply to secure her place as leader of the film, so that any time they pushed back or told her no, she saw it as retaliation. Point 11 was asking for a mutually agreed Sony representative required on the set. Wayfarer didn't have a problem with that, but Blake wanted it to be one specific person, and they didn't agree with that because that might have been difficult to set up timing for everything. But overall, they had no problem with a Sony representative there. Point 12, she wanted a producer that she personally approved of to be hired to supervise filming. Wayfarer didn't want to do that because of the additional expense. But in the end, like with everything else, they agreed to it because even with these additional costs, it still was cheaper than if she refused to return to work. And so Todd Black was brought on as this additional producer. She demanded that existing third-party producers empowered to actively supervise the production. Wayfarer took the stance that this was already in place. Point 14, any body doubles that were supposed to step in for Blake for intimate and sexual violence scenes had to be approved by Blake. And Wayfarer agreed to this even though, like everything else, it was bringing about unplanned expenses. But as it turned out, at Blake's request, no body doubles were used in the film. Point 15. She didn't just want this over herself, even though she never signed her own nudity rider. She wanted to impose her opinions on young Lily, as if she owned the entire character. Wayfarer felt this was an overstep because she had no right to control another actor's decisions. They agreed to it, but if you remember, when she was refusing to come back to work, do you remember what they had to do? They had to film the scenes with younger Lily and younger Atlas. And this was another thing that added expenses to the movie. But the point was, those scenes, because of Blake's actions, were already filmed. And unlike Blake, Isabella had already signed her nudity rider, and so it had already been filmed in compliance with her own nudity rider. And that point is very interesting to me, because if I had encountered true sexual inappropriateness and sexual harassment in the workplace, the last thing I would want to do is have sex scenes with this person, especially if there was a body double right there that could do it instead of me. I think a lot of us women have had situations where we were made to feel uncomfortable by someone, not necessarily in the workplace. But picture those moments or that moment, and then imagine agreeing when you didn't have to get almost nude, that up close to someone, and if you've seen the movie, their scenes are quite intimate. There's scenes of him kissing her abdomen, simulated sex scenes. This is something I can't wrap my head around. And now we get to another point of contention in point 16 that says all day players must be hired through talent agencies, not personal connections. First of all, this is hypocritical because Blake Lively's sister was cast in the movie simply because she's Blake's sister. So she was hired through personal connection. But what she's referring to is the actor who played Blake's OBGYN was introduced to her as a friend of Justin's. She took that to mean it was just some guy that happened to be Justin's friend. She also exaggerated the situation, and we've already discussed this in another point, but her description of the birth scene was knowingly false. In her words, and you'll see this typed in her statement, she said that she only had a small piece of fabric covering her genitalia during the birth scene. So she's making it like just some random friend of Justin's comes in with his hands by her genitalia that only have a small strip of fabric. Now we've already seen that what she wore during this scene was a hospital gown. She had on underwear, and over that underwear, she had a pregnancy suit. The only parts of her body that were exposed were her head, her arms, and her legs. Here's what she didn't take the time to know about fellow cast. This man is more qualified than she is. He's a Shakespearean-trained actor with an MFA in acting from UCLA. He's been on numerous TV shows. He toured nationally with a Tony Award-winning acting company. He attended Oxford's acting program on a full scholarship. He is a professional actor. And I love the statement that they make, that her suggesting that this highly trained and experienced actor would have an unseemly interest in being in close proximity to her nearly nude genitalia, and they emphasize again it was not nude or exposed, that this claim is inappropriate, invasive, and humiliating to the actor. This guy was just an actor playing the role he was hired to play. He was not trying to get his hands or get a peek at Blake's genitalia, and that's insulting. She rewrote and directed that scene. In spite of being offended by this accusation, they agreed to it, just like everything else. And these are the things that make me so angry about her accusations. Historically, women have been not believed when bad things happen to them, especially in Hollywood. One of the main reasons that sexual assault is more often than not reported is because of all of the years of women being not believed or being blamed when these kinds of things happen to them. In very recent years, things started to change. Things started to be done. These powerful men started to be called out for their actions. There was a whole Me Too movement. Women came together to support each other, to believe each other. When you have a situation like this, especially this very, very public thing, it's like taking the whole Me Too movement and throwing it with both hands back into the dark ages. Good luck to any actors from here on out that has a legitimate claim to report. Because as we can see right here, this claim is ridiculous. A professional actor was hired in a scene she rewrote, in a scene she directed, and she makes it like this guy who just wanted to get up into her genitalia. And this is what angers me the most about the whole thing. What this will do for all women going forward. Hollywood has historically not been a safe place for women. Since the beginning of filmmaking, women who wanted parts were forced to submit sexually to producers and directors, and were often assaulted by other actors. They were just beginning to be believed. Their stories were being heard, and not even by all. Many were still being called liars. And now we have this, and it's disgusting, and it's enraging. Can you imagine how this guy feels? Seeing this come up in a lawsuit, and you're the guy who played the OBGYN, and you're better qualified as an actor than the actress who's making these claims? That you're just some Joe Schmo off the street who was Justin's friend and all up in her business? It's insulting, to say the least. Point 17 was an all-hands meeting before production resumes. Now, Wayfarer says they embraced this offer. They thought it was sincere. They thought it was going to be a professional meeting, so they agreed. So that's all of the 17 requests. But we see this email from Sony to Jamie Heath, who's listing out these items with lots of questions about them. Very confused. They mention, I'm surprised you don't already have a negotiated nudity writer in place. Or am I misinterpreting her comment? Sony doesn't know that she's been given it and never put her notes or signed it or returned it. He wants more information on items 11 through 13. Item 14, he says, but she's already approved and engaged a stunt double. 16, he's confused about the day players. So it's not just Justin or Jamie or Wayfarer that are confused about this 17-point demand. So he says he's sending it to the internal folks and asking his production attorney to offer any assistance. It seems to take everyone by surprise. And this part makes me sad. In the face of these terrifying and false accusations and Blake's threat that she would not return, Justin realizes that he just has to give Blake control if he wants this film to happen. His film would be taken from him by threats and coercion, and there was nothing to be done about it. And so we see on December 27th, Justin sends an email to his production team. It's obvious in this email that all of the production team is well aware of what's been going on, because he tells them that he spent the better part of the last few days trying to figure this out. Everyone knows how I feel about this, and how angry I am that Blake has taken over our film and somehow rewrote a movie we spent years developing, writing, and funding. So yes, I am furious and sad, but I will continue to get back up with the goal of getting us to the finish line. I have come to terms with the fact that the only way out is through. I'm waving the white flag and submitting. I'm going to give her 98% of what she wants. I'm sure none of us have the energy to fight anymore. The team who's been working their butts off needs a shooting script on January 2nd. From this paragraph, you can see that this is a conversation amongst them. He's saying we, not I. And we've seen some of the text messages between Justin and other producers. So he gets that out of the way and then proceeds to give them direction, pointing out that the big issues are going to be intimacy, how and what we're shooting for those scenes, and how this script is going to be presented to her and with what notes. Imagine having to walk on tiptoes around your actress. To that end, we all need to get on the phone and talk through it, as the risk of something innocuous or not meeting her standards could and would very likely be used against me, as it already has. And creativity is impossible in an environment shrouded in fear. By now, we all know what she is capable of. For the duration of the making of this film, this is how it was. Blake was in charge, and Wayfarer and their people and Sony and their people finished their job in fear. And then we have a return email from one of the producers saying thank you for this thoughtful breakdown, especially this week, and especially considering the circumstances, and then gives the time that they're free. And from that point of conceding the film into her hands, he says that Blake's demands continue to cause additional work and stress for the production team. And although he's the director and the person who began this whole process of making this film, here's what it looks like from this point on, as we see in this email to one of the producers. He says, I'm not sure quite how to handle it, but I'm doing these small rewrites and I'm going to be sending back to the producers and all of you, and then they're going to send it to Blake. And then we will be in a negotiation for what the final script looks like. So instead of him being able to put his script out there in his direction, they've got to pass it through Blake and negotiate his own movie. So earlier we talked about this return to production demands meeting. So that day comes. So filming was interrupted by this strike. Then Blake wouldn't come back to work, so they filmed the younger Lily and Atlas. They're excited to get Blake back on the set and finish this movie. So Justin, Heath, a Sony representative, the film's first assistant director, and 2 producers show up for this meeting with their binders in tow, ready to get to work to see how they could move forward. If this were a serious matter, Blake should have had someone there from her union, someone from the Screen Actors Guild. But her representative is her husband, her dragon, a man who has nothing to do with this film, a man who's emotionally involved in everything. This was highly improper. If he wanted to speak to Justin because he believed some accusations about Justin towards his wife, that should have been done outside of a professional meeting like this. With Ryan not having any part of this movie, he should not even have been present. Not only is he present, but after having Blake read a list of grievances that Justin describes as being troubling and fictional, Ryan then goes into such an aggressive tirade that Justin said it could only be described as traumatic, that he had never been spoken to like that in his life. One of the producers, who'd been a producer for 40 years, said that they had never seen anyone speak to someone like that in a meeting. And the Sony representative said that she often thinks of this meeting and regrets that she did not intervene to stop Ryan's tirade against Justin. And that says a lot. And I'm assuming these people will be witnesses at the trial. And I saw a TikToker talk about this, and I thought it was really interesting. She asked a question. She asked, directed to Blake, where are your text messages to your husband saying Justin made me feel not safe today? Where were text messages from Ryan to his wife, checking up on her? Are you okay? Did Justin do anything weird today? Do you need me to come down there? Where are her texts to her mom, to her sister, to her union, to people who would have been concerned at the time of this happening, and people who could have done something about it? To have gone through and made this document, but kept it from being appropriately handled, and instead using it as a blackmail, as extortion, to get control of the movie is what makes this whole thing strange. As I said, most of us women have had once, if not multiple, situations that we've been made uncomfortable in our lifetimes. It's 2025. The reaction to this is not the expected one. If these things really occurred, where was the reaching out to people who could actually help you? Whether it be the emotional support of your mom and sister or friend, husband, or the legal support of the institutions that are put in place to protect you in the workplace. None of that. She didn't reach for any of that. She used it all to take control of the movie, to steal the show. That's what's so suspicious about these claims and this behavior. If you really feel unsafe, if you really feel violated, take the appropriate action. Don't use it as leverage to get what you want. So they leave this so-called meeting, and they say that it's now very clear to them that this was an escalation in the campaign for her to take over this film, and that now she was joined by Ryan. And we see that in her promotion of the film. Ryan's there, and he has these very bizarre scripted interviews and really weird ways to promote this film. He appears almost manic in them. You can see that he's worked up and obsessed and jealous.
It's not every day the husband gets to interview his wife's love interest in a film. It's kind of crazy.
I don't remember seeing this on the schedule.
Dive in, shall we? So I saw you posing in a photo with Mrs. Reynolds, and I'm sorry, what do you call her? Do you guys have a nickname or something? Okay, no, just so it's Mrs. Okay. Anyway, I saw this photo. It was very suggestive. So you explain that. Are you smuggling pumpkins? Got a couple of small pumpkins there? Jesus Christ, my heart is beating like crazy right now.
Ryan?
Yep.
You want to take a break?
From Blake? Sure.
Hello, Brandon.
No.
Well, it's not every day the mother-in-law of the leading lady gets to interview the love interest, and the man trying to replace my sweet little gummy bear, Ryan. I stopped taking my blood thinner medication because if I can't have you, I don't want me.
Mrs. Reynolds.
Did you know that Ryan lost his father in 2015?
It says Ryan would love to have a new dad to have a catch. And I think he could really use a man in his life. Hugh is no spring chicken anymore. Blink once for yes, or blink once for I'd love to be your new dad. He blinked.
Mrs. Reynolds.
Call me Blake.
Oh,
I could blow your mind, dog.
And he even hauls in his friend Hugh Jackman, and it gets even more bizarre then.
No.
It's not every day a guy gets to interview the love interest of his best friend's wife, and the guy trying to replace Ryan as a husband, and me as his best mate. What the hell are you doing messing with my best buddy's wife?
Sir, I have no idea what's happening at all today.
It's not your film, Ryan. Why are you writing for it? Why are you doing these promotions for it? Why are you being so weird? And why do you carry it over into your movie that you're making, Deadpool, that you ran your own director off of? Yeah, we'll get to that story later. It's very strange. His reaction as well. Most husbands, they hear this happens to their wife. They're not going to make weird premieres and make weird movies about it. He's been in the business a very long time. He's a powerful man. He knows the agencies that are available to him to file a complaint like this, but he doesn't use it either. Instead, he joins in this terror campaign to ensure that Blake gets control and power over this movie. These reactions are bizarre. I've seen people making TikToks and Reels about the character in the Deadpool movie, and this will come up later. But I just saw one that said that they thought maybe the dog symbolizes Blake. I don't know if you've seen the movie. I don't like it. It's crass. It's violent. To me, it doesn't belong on the Disney Channel or in Marvel. But there's this dog that belongs to the character that, as you'll see later in this document, that Justin believes was fashioned after him. Sorry for the low volume and the splicey bits here. I did get copyright struck before for showing just a little clip from Netflix. So I'm trying not to let that happen this time. But I want you to pay attention to what they're saying. And these are things that they've accused Justin of doing or saying. It's just so childish.
Everybody calls me Nice Pool. Oh my goodness, wait till you see Lady Pool. She is gorgeous. She just had a baby too. And can't even tell. I don't think you're supposed to say that. That's okay. I identify as a feminist. Right. AKA dog rule. Careful where you put your hand. She's 90% G-spot and she'll let you know it.
So his dog comes to Deadpool and is licking his face. It's this crazy looking dog.
You let this little flirt out of your sight for 1 second and she starts shopping for a new papa.
And the man that he believes is fashioned after him is called Nice Pool. And you'll see all the reasons why he thinks that later in the document.
If you ever want to give her up, or if she needs a new home, or if something should happen to you, I'd love to be her papa. Well, what would ever happen to me? Lots of stuff.
The whole movie just has an odd connotation to it. I really, really don't like that movie. And I usually love the Marvel movies. But I thought it was interesting that that content creator equated the dog to Blake. It made me go back and watch those bits again. And it is strange. And it's very strange the rage that he has towards him. And the way that he ends up killed by Lady Pool. Which Lady Pool is another thing that Blake misrepresented. Telling people she played Lady Pool is kind of misleading. Because Lady Pool is completely masked. It's Blake's voice. It's just a couple of lines. But it's not Blake in the costume. It's a stunt woman. So saying you play this role is kind of misleading because you just voiced the role. Someone else played it. But that's beside my point. My point is, these reactions are strange. And they're suspicious. But they go on to say that they had to continue because financiers had invested substantial resources, hundreds of cast and crew members had endured months without work due to the strikes, and years of development had gone into bringing the film to life. And also, Justin and Jamie really wanted this message brought forth. As mentioned, way back in early development of the film, they had contracted with a woman's organization that this organization was going to get 1% of what this movie made. So a lot of things were riding on it. So he said he raised his white flag and just went with the flow. He also wanted to add, the night that he went and got screamed at by Ryan, that was the so-called meeting, that the list of grievances that Blake had read out were not the 17-point return to production demands. They were additional, and he says that these were never presented to any of the parties that were present. They were verbally read out by Blake. It was never put on paper to be distributed to the people that it should have been distributed to. None of them got a copy. And that in the complaint that she filed, not the lawsuit, but the complaint that she filed and that they believe she submitted to the New York Times, it misleadingly says that Wayfarer had signed an agreement to the list of 30 items. The only thing they signed was the 17-point return to production demands, and that this was signed 2 weeks after this meeting, and not on the day of the meeting. So filming resumes, and in the end, Blake does sign off that the rest of the filming did conclude without any further grievances or references to previous disputes. Then in what he calls her completing her usurpation of the film is the part that seems to strike him the hardest about the filmmaking side of it. I misspoke this in the last one. I said that they had 15 days, but that's not correct. The Directors Guild of America, this institution, requires a 10-week editing period for directors to privately edit and assemble their director's cut. He describes it as like a holy time period for directors. They get to be alone with all of their film to create their cut that they feel reflects the artistic vision that they had in making the movie. This is a requirement by the Directors Guild of America. It's put there to protect directors. But even after him letting her rewrite everything, direct everything her own way, he at least thought he would get to be the one to take this film and shape it as close to his vision as he could, after all of her alterations. But no, this additional producer that she had requested and was granted, Todd Black, relays her request that she wants to join Justin in the editing bay. And he says someone with Blake's involvement in the industry, her knowledge of it, she knew full well that it was not appropriate to ask for this. And he notes that despite her allegations that Justin had made her uncomfortable, she insists on working right there with him on this director's cut. Now, in spite of all this, we can see him still being as pleasant as possible about the situation. In this text message, the name's blacked out, but he says, this person and I had a great chat the other day. I'm assuming it's this Todd Black, but he says he let me know you'd like to come into the edit before you leave for your film, and I think it's a great idea. I agree that we work really well together. So him saying he agrees kind of gives you the idea that she said that they work well together. And with all you've put into this film, I completely understand wanting to give notes and have input before you leave for your other movie. And then he kind of lets her know that he's really just started his cut, and so that he needs a little time to get it in the shape to present. He tries to offer up a day that would be good, and mentions that she'll be leaving to film in Italy. So he tries to set things up according to her schedule, and even to keep her in the loop once she's gone. And she responds, hey, thank you for the note, I appreciate it, but it's never enough for her. I'd love to be in the passenger seat with you as soon as possible. So she doesn't like his answer. She doesn't want to wait for his director cut. She doesn't want to wait for him to get things ready. She wants in there now. She says, I don't need you to formally present anything. I understand you've just seen the first assembly and have a mountain ahead of you. And you also understand that he's supposed to have 10 weeks, right? And then she goes on, I'll be invaluable to you in recall alone as you put together what you're looking for. If you were, he would have asked you himself, but he didn't. And then she says, I've also been rewatching all the dailies. So it looks like she has the dailies now. Tons of nuanced gems. The sooner we put our heads together, the better. Very excited to dive back into the work. Let me know. It's very clear she is not going to stand by. She is not going to let him have his 10-week director's cut time. He responds, "Hey Blake, I hear you and I do know how helpful you've been and will continue to be. I do need some time to get sorted with my editors and wrap my head around the film itself. I will reach out to you at the end of the week to let you know the progress I've made so we can figure out the best time for you to start with me. Thank you." He's trying to keep her in her place. And now we have more conversations between Justin and editors, and I think it's very telling that people like the editors and the producers are seemingly siding with Justin here. Even the woman representative from Sony, in her saying that she wished she would have stuck up for him against Ryan. But editor 1 says, "Hey, just checking in. Hope you're hanging in there. We're gonna get through this." Justin says, "Thanks for checking in. I've sat with it, and I think the best path forward spiritually and what's best for the movie is that I suck it up and let her in. I've sent a message requesting that it start on the 18th, and then we would just let her in until she leaves, and then her cuts and updates throughout the process. I'll let you guys know what she says. Thanks for being awesome, Dream Team." Editor 2 says, "We got you." Editor 1 says, "I think that sounds like a very good plan on all fronts." And then he lets him know, "Side note, I offered for her to join on the 18th, and she replied she'd like to join now because she'll be invaluable to me as she knows every take. I'm gonna stick to the date and see how that goes and what comes next." Editor 1, "Oi." Editor 2, "Stick to it." And then they go on talking about the editing. I would think that any producers or directors that she's planned to work with in the future, and she has a long list of projects in the works, I would think that any of them reading these notes would start to worry at this point. Because seeing the whole team like this about her, it really says a lot. She should really be embarrassed that this stuff is out there for us to see, that this is what the crew thought of her. And then they get back to the topic in their conversation about Blake. In preparation for her coming, he wants them to get their systems set up in a way that they can find all their takes very quickly, because he knows that this is something Blake is going to do, and that the less time they can spend searching for takes, the better it's going to be for the overall process. And then he asks what time he should let her know to come, 9:30 to 3 or 10 to 3, to give them more time. Editor 1 says 10 because it gives them wiggle room for any powwows they need before they meet with her. But later, the 2 days that she was supposed to collaborate, first they turn into 10 days. Then she wants to work alone in the editing bay without Justin. And even though he'd done everything he could to incorporate her ideas, he says that she was not satisfied with merely collaborating with the director. She wanted to be the director, and she wanted her own creative version of the film. So they continue their conversations leading up to the time that she's coming. Justin tells them she's asked for all the cards and data as well, and Editor 1 says the best defense is a great movie. So they're not trying to be nasty, they're not trying to fight, they're just saying, let's do a great job, we can prove ourselves like that. From there, they continue to have these conversations about what to do with Blake. Meanwhile, they're trying to put this film together. That montage scene that keeps coming up comes up yet again, because this was written as the scene of them falling in love. But we saw what she did to the filming of it. She just kept talking through it. So now the footage they have is not the footage that it was supposed to be for this important montage that is supposed to be them falling in love. They end up combining with other scenes to try to find scenes with them kissing. But since this involves intimacy, they're nervous about how to deal with it. So they're discussing how to use some of the scenes that they have to try to put this all together. The next month we see Justin ask, Blake wants to know when you could be there next week. And him and Editor 2 discuss it. Editor 1 says, and so it begins. Editor 2 says, I want Blake to feel like she's getting what she wants so we can move on from this need of hers. Justin says, for the record, she's been getting what she wants this entire movie. So we can see how they feel about her butting into this part of the process. They've all had it. The conversation goes on, and she's getting to edit, which is what she wants. Let's remember that, LOL. And Editor 2 is trying to be accommodating because he doesn't want to get blamed for only being able to work certain hours and needing more time. Like I said, isn't that embarrassing that people are seeing how you made the people around you feel? So they're discussing whether or not Editor 2 is going to work from home or go in. And his thought is about saving money, saying he could work from home if she doesn't care and that would save money. Editor 1 adds, "You're definitely nicer than I am. I would want to stay here to make it less convenient for her since she's going to be in a completely different time zone. Justin has bent over backwards for her for months on end. I don't think you should have to do that too." And Editor 2 says, "Well, if it were some random place, that would be different, but it's New York. I have people there." They continue making their decisions, and Editor 2 adds, "Make her stay in Italy. Tell her I demand to edit in Italy." They don't want her back. And then we see the editors asking him, as they should because he's the director, but he has to answer saying that's going to end up being a Blake call, honestly. She has approval of that scene. And they're both questioning, even for young Lily. And Justin says when she claimed she was unsafe, she redid the nudity writer to get approval of young Lily too. So even though Isabella had her own nudity writer film the scenes that she was comfortable with, Blake gets to make the call of the final cuts of her scenes too, which is ridiculous. Editor 1 says, "Shaking my head." And Justin says, because she wasn't a part of writing that sex scene. Because remember, when this all gets filmed with the younger characters, it's during the time that she wasn't there. She was refusing to come back to work, so they had to rearrange the filming and start filming the younger ones just so they could get something filmed. And he adds, she didn't want the character depicting her to have sex in high school. And then he adds, honestly, it's all about control so she could get to where she will be next week. All good. What does he mean by where she'll be at next week? And this is where it gets absolutely crazy. She uses threats to coerce Sony to let her create her own cut of the film. This is unheard of. This right is the director's right and only the director's right. Not only does she get the cut, but Wayfarer and Sony have to pay for it. Of course, Justin and Wayfarer protest this. They're like, no way. But Sony tells them that Blake has refused to promote the film unless her demands were met. Can you imagine? This is where she just absolutely takes the show hostage, just steals it. So they put it out there again, hey, she still hasn't signed her engagement contract. She's got to at least do that before her demands are met. She still refuses. And Sony urges Wayfarer to give in. And then we have this message from Sony to Jamie Heath, and he's listing out all the things that Blake's approving, trying to get approved. She's asking for more time with her editor, and they say, we know it was conditional on signing contract, but asking if you will reconsider. So even they are expecting Wayfarer to bow, instead of telling Blake she has to do something. And if you don't, you're going to greatly hurt the movie because of Blake's threats. So she gets what she wanted. They have no choice because Sony's saying, hey, she's not going to promote the movie. If she doesn't promote the movie, it's going to hurt the movie. Just do it and don't make her sign the contract. And then we see messages between Justin and his editors again. At this point, Justin's just, as he's been saying, we focus on what's best for the film. It will all work out. Then he asks the editors if they've been allowed to take a peek at her cut. Editor 2 says, I've just been told we're not permitted to look. The editors of the film and the director do not get to see the cut she's just made. She took over the film, made her own cut. They don't even get to see it. Justin asks, wow, when did that happen? Editor says, as per Sony. Editor 2 says, this evening. And Justin says, what I just said, the editors and director isn't allowed to look at an actress's cut. Got it. Well, here we go. We will keep taking the high road. And then we learn that at this point, Justin still thought that Blake's cuts were just going to be supplemental to his work. And so he keeps going with the director's cut. But again, Blake, who hasn't signed a contract that they can hold her to, has stolen this film at this point and is refusing to promote. And this is everything. Trailers, posters, social media posts, all of it. And then a screening is set up that Wayfarer and Sony have to pay for, and a version of the film that they not only have not approved, they haven't even seen it. The director and the editors and the whole production company. Her next move, even more heartless. She fires the editors. These people have been working on this film since before she was hired, and she fires them. and she replaces them with editors and a music composer from Ryan's recent projects. Not only that, just like with the wardrobes, the musical score had already been finished, but she uses this composer and demands that the music be replaced, and Sony conceded. So Justin has continued to work on his director's cut, and she's gone full steam ahead, gone rogue with her own editors and music composer, and created her own version of this film. So now there's two competing versions of the same film, as it says, because there's no other way to say it. One made by the film's actual director, and one made by a person with no contractual or creative right to even approach the editing bay, let alone make her own cut. So it goes on between the threat to withhold promotion of the film and the threat to end Justin's career. They come to an agreement. So what they decide is that they'll have an official audience test both of the versions. And again, Wayfair and Sony have to pay for this. And what Blake agrees to is that if Justin's director's cut tests higher, that she will drop it and fully cooperate and let Justin finish the film with no more interference. At this point, it seems she has so much confidence in her version. But as it turns out, in a side-by-side comparison of audience tests, Justin's cut scores significantly higher. And not just significantly higher, but amongst the key audience demographics that they want and need to love the film. So much for her thinking she could do it better. And here we see that score, 20% higher in the excellent rating and 15% higher in the definite recommends. It's not just a little 1%, 5% win. And then we see something that's not unexpected about her cut. The only group that she went up with in the excellent category was men, and they are absolutely not our audience. I mean, it's a chick flick. Relying on men for this category is a silly idea. They're probably mostly not going to go see this movie unless they're drugged there by their partner. And editor one continues, and that's only because she focused more of the movie on herself. And men like to look at Blake Lively. Men are such pigs. So that's when we learn that her version is naturally focused more on herself. But even after the numbers are there, and the numbers don't lie, and the numbers aren't biased, they're the numbers from test audiences. She agreed she would let it go if he won, but no. She reneges on that promise and insists that her version be released to the public. Then she goes as far as to say that the author, Colleen Hoover, would refuse to promote the film if her version isn't chosen. So I guess Colleen somehow became her dragon. Not only that, but Sony calls and says that Blake nor any of the cast would promote this film unless it's Blake's cut. So Justin either had to kill the film and his own career by insisting it be his version, or to put out her version just to get it out. As it says, he was essentially forced to fire himself as director and allow Blake to finish the film. But he felt like that was all he could do, and I hope in depositions it comes out what she's been saying to the cast to make them side with her. Or is this another situation where reportedly Taylor didn't like being called a dragon and being drug into this? Is it even true that these people were saying that? Or is that what Blake was saying? Because the whole cast and crew loved Justin until Blake made these claims. And again, I keep going back to, everything was fine while they were physically working together. All of this happened during the time that they were months out of each other's company. Earlier I mentioned his back infection. So just after this, everything's going wrong for this poor guy. 2 days after, he just has to let go and say, okay, let it be her version. At least we'll get the movie out. He ends up in the hospital. He has a serious infection in his spine. That's scary because your spine is linked to your brainstem. It's a place you don't want infections to be. So he ends up in there for quite a while. And much like when Blake had taken over the wardrobe and Sony saw pictures of what she had thrown together, they contact Justin and say, you got to do something about this. Well, now her edit's out. And it was one thing when she was holding it hostage and making these demands. But once they see her edit, once they see the numbers related to her edit compared to Justin's, they're getting worried. So what do? With the help of Screen Engine, which is the testing company that ran the screen tests, they have to deal with Blake now. and basically beg her to put as much of Justin's edit back in the movie as possible. They know her edit's not good, and they've put millions in this. Thankfully, Justin didn't have to deal with this, and it was Sony and Screen Engine. And now that that whole mess is done with, her next move is to dictate much of the marketing. And we see this in a message from Editor 1. He's talking to the editor. He tells him there's an infection in his spine that's pretty serious. They caught it early, but he said, my body is done. Too much stress. He's going to be in the hospital for days and then on IV antibiotics for 6 weeks. Editor 1 says Blake is so determined to handle the marketing on the movie, just let her, and tells him to look out for himself. Once Blake got control of the marketing, though, guess what she does? You've seen the movie cover. It's just her face. She not only took out Justin, she took out everybody else. It's just her face. But she takes him out of all posters, all trailers, all promotional materials. And if they don't cooperate, she's still refusing to promote the film. So Sony reaches out to Heath. He's talking about the marketing. Not only have they taken his face out of everything, she made a version that doesn't even say a film by Justin Baldoni. She takes everything of him out. But they can't just do that because it's his film, so they have to get his permission. So this guy's in the hospital, an infection in his spine, 6 weeks worth of IV antibiotics, and they come to him with this. Please sign off so we can take your name off of this, not just your face. So after Sony has more or less forced her to put Justin's cuts back in, she still can't let go of her own cut. She's just doing whatever she wants at this point. Colleen Hoover has an annual convention hosting authors and fans from around the world. It's called Book Bonanza. Justin, who started this whole thing with Colleen back in 2019, has been so excited to attend this. But Blake's not done with him yet. She screens her cut at this Bonanza. And even Sony is objecting to this. They didn't like her cut. They made her put Justin's work back in her cut. But she says, at least I'm gonna screen it here, and does it anyway. Then she doesn't allow Justin to attend. And even though Sony made her put some scenes back in, he doesn't get to see this cut either before it gets shown to the world.
And just know, it's literally, this is not a bit. It's literally not done. So to be honest, what really happened is we were like, we're going to show the movie, and the studio was like, no, you're going to show 20 minutes. So we're like, no, we're going to show the movie. And they're like, it's not done. And I was like, they don't her. True. They're like, if everything's not perfect and it's not done, and what if we're going to change things? I was like, these are the people who authored the success of the book.
Yeah, the only audience in the world that's going to see this cut. It is an early cut. Blake had to fight for you guys to get to see this early, so we want it to go well.
I literally brought the movie with me on the airplane. I have a folder with a disc, a hard drive.
And now we see Jen Abel, who is one of the PR people. She says, hi, Jamie, just filled in about BookCon. I know this is devastating and such a kick in the gut. It's petty and childish at this point. I'm just making sure you're okay. We will get through this. Eye on the prize. Her attending BookCon is a win for the film ultimately, because at least she's promoting it. And if she wants to drag her butt to Texas, then let her. You can be home with your family, which is important. Justin responds, she kicked me out officially from the film now. She's finishing it all. I can't be involved. Music, sound, VFX, everything. He says, I'll make it through somehow. Just need to feel it all. My heart just breaks for him at this point. Then one of the editors that was let go because of her asks Justin what version's going out. He has no idea. Evidently, they're all at Book Bonanza. And then he just says, hard. And then he says, second test didn't go any better. Over 35 went down, and under stayed the same. I guess Sony asked for more changes to get it closer to our cut, but I haven't watched. So much for this talent she thought she had. Even after Sony forced her to put some cuts back, it still didn't test well. And so Sony's saying, get it back to Justin's version. But then he goes on to say that she's showing her cut at Bonanza. It was supposed to be ours, and then I was uninvited. The whole thing is pretty cruel and intense. And the editors just can't believe it. They said, I just hope you love or at least can stomach the cut that's going out into the world. And he says, haven't seen it, can't yet. He's trying to make the best with it. He's trying to deal with how he feels. He says that he's distancing himself from the movie as best as he can for his sanity, that there have been more hard things over the last few weeks that would blow their mind. He says that she's been working on it more and been mixing, I'm assuming that means his cuts with hers, and that he's getting to give notes as a studio today, not a director. Very hard, but I'm okay. So instead of deciding the final cut, he gets to give notes, but not as director's notes, as studio notes. He says we made a beautiful baby together. The baby might not grow up to be exactly who we thought, but it's still beautiful. That's what I'm holding on to. Very proud of us. The editor says yes, the movie we handed her was so good that even if it's been screwed with, the base work will still shine through. The last I heard was that she was putting back a fair amount of our version, just not sure what that entailed or to what extent. I guess you'll find out today. If you think about it, we didn't even finish our director's cut because she intervened. So ideally, at some point, we can take a week and all just do it together for ourselves. But that opens up a can of worms, so we'll need to let this play out for a while before we pull that card. I, for one, would love to see that version. Actually, I would love to see the whole movie redone with someone else in her place. And you know who I was thinking of? Because I just saw her at the Critics' Choice Awards. Her old co-star that she used to make miserable, Leighton Meester. That would be a beautiful movie. And just when you think she's done, she's not. She still hasn't signed the contract, so they have no power over her. She's still threatening the same stuff. Now what she wants is a producer credit. If you remember when she first came to the movie, she asked for that, and they said no. But now they have to concede. And I can't help but wonder if this is the whole reason she never signed the contract. Because without that contract signed, they can't make her do anything. Is she done? No. This is where she asks for that PGA mark, the producer credit, that certified designation licensed by the Producers Guild of America that we talked about in the first episode. This is given to producers who performed the majority of the producing work on a motion picture. She didn't. She bullied around to get the wardrobe, she rewrote stuff, and she kidnapped the movie at the end. That does not make her a producer. But with all these threats, it states, despite unanimous recognition of the absurdity and the unmistakably extortionate threats, Sony and other parties, despite being adamant not to support her demand for the unentitled mark, ultimately acquiesced and submitted letters of support. I hope now that this is discovered, that gets taken away from her. This is like cheating to get a gold medal. She should have to lose it after this. Now Wayfarer and Justin, they're like, nope, this is where we draw the line. She didn't earn this. We're not writing letters. Because this is a false representation to the PGA. What does she do? She instructs Sony to tell them any goodwill left between us is done. That's another threat. Earlier she said the gloves come off, and now this. There wasn't anything else left to threaten, except her allegations. And with that thought in mind, they sign letters on her behalf, but before they do, and this was smart, they sent an email to their attorneys documenting that they were signing under duress. Documents signed under duress are not legal, so hopefully this will cause her to lose that PGA credit. And here's a copy of that letter. Jamie Heath says, I'm writing to you all regarding a letter that I wrote on behalf of Justin and myself addressed to the Producers Guild. As you know, we received a request to write a recommendation on behalf of Blake for her to receive the PGA mark. This was a request that we feel was unreasonable and cold-hearted. Essentially, the movie It Ends With Us has been taken unjustly from Justin as a director and essentially from Wayfarer's control due to the extortion of Blake. Without going into all the details of the events that have transpired over the months, Justin and I ended up agreeing to write the letter due to feeling trapped. She continues to hold a threat over our heads, and every time we try and hold a line, she uses that threat either directly or indirectly to get us to fold. Make no mistake, I'm not suggesting that we were literally forced to acquiesce. But given the high profile of the movie, the partnership with Sony, the amount of money invested, and the need to complete the movie, we have written the letter on her behalf, omitting the truth of how and why she was able to contribute in the ways we listed. There is nothing to do with this letter now. It only serves as a way to memorialize why the letter was sent in the first place, should we ever need to explain it. Thank you, Jamie. And then we have the letter that they sent to the Producers Guild of America, and I can't even bring myself to read it out loud, knowing that it was written under duress with the threat of blackmail extortion. I simply cannot give it my voice. But if you would like to read it yourself, just pause the video and have a read. After she got the mark, got everything she wanted, stole the movie, took his face and name off of all of the marketing materials, she unfollows him on social media. Not only that, whatever she tells the author and the rest of the cast gets them to do the same. These are the kinds of things that get noticed. Earlier, she had referred to something as crumbs. It's a social media strategy that she said she learned from a celebrity friend. You give fans just enough little hints, little crumbs, to allow them to come to their own conclusion. And that's what she was doing here. Doing promotions with all the other cast. Taking his name off of everything, his face off of everything. Not allowing him to be on the red carpet with her or anyone else. Unfollowing him on social media. Convincing others to unfollow him. And it was really hurtful to him when the other cast joined. But you can understand, if a woman comes to you and tells you that something inappropriate happened to her, and it's someone you look up to, it's someone famous, the tendency would be to believe it. Does that mean that they think Justin's that way? He shows conversations with Isabella, the actress who played young Lily. He says, "You did so awesome today. So happy to be working with you." Now keep in mind, there were intimate scenes with Isabella too that he directed. She's a gorgeous young girl. She responds, "Thank you so much. I'm so excited. Thank you for being a great director and being so wonderful to work with already. Let me know whenever you need me for anything." And he says, "So kind. More to come. You are gonna kill it." This is happening in May. Obviously, at this point, when this stuff was already supposed to have happened, this was during the time Blake's buying Justin matchas and everything's wonderful. It's obvious from all communications at this point in time, nothing bad has happened. Even though the accusations were about this time period and previous to this time period. Then in July, when Blake is gone and they're filming The Young Kids, she sends him another message. "Hey, just got my film developed from when we were shooting, so here's this sweet pic. I also have to say thank you so much for an incredible experience on my first film. I still can't shake the feeling of it all because it truly was life-changing for me. You are such a wonderful, smart, and sincere director, and you created such a, listen to this, comfortable, safe space for me to feel like I could fully step into this role. I couldn't have asked for a more welcoming environment." Ladies and gentlemen, does that not say it all? And then it gets to the point where she unfollows him and says she won't show up if he's going to be there. When this was her actual safe and comfortable experience, this welcoming environment. He says, "What a kind message. You were such a joy and pleasure to work with. Your openness, your raw talent, your kindness, and your excitement made me fall in love with directing again. I'm so excited for your career and for everyone to see you in this film. You have a big career in front of you. Looking forward to seeing you again in September, even if we don't need you to work. Come visit." Very kind, very professional. So her filming is done at this point. This is the end of her experience there. So whatever causes her to turn on him comes later out of Blake's mouth. And that's exactly what point 160 says. When Blake wasn't on the set and they actually worked together, everything was fine. But what happened? When she spent substantial time with Blake during film promotions, that's when she felt compelled to shun Justin. And so he feels, as he says in point 161, that Blake was laying the groundwork to explain away her theft of the film and exile of Justin. She had to get rid of him. If she wanted this credit, if she wanted the power to make her own cut, she couldn't leave the director in his appropriate position. She needed something to give her the power. That's what he's saying here. I truly believe that it was completely calculated that she never signed a contract. And he says it was all so painful that he had no intention of ever revealing what actually happened to give her that power. He was willing to walk away, let her take credit, let her take praise. He just wanted the film to succeed, and he was happy to move on. But she knew the truth of her actions. Certain personalities do not allow people to admit their mistakes. Instead of a conscience making them feel bad, they get angry and defensive. To me, that's what it looks like happens here. She's afraid that what she did will come out. She doesn't feel bad about what she did. She'd do it again. But she doesn't want the world to know what she did. She just wants people out there telling her what a great producer she was and praising her for all her work. In all her interviews, she's telling people she did the wardrobe. She's telling people she did the writing. She's telling people she directed things. She wants the praise, but she doesn't want it to come out how she got all that power. Not only will she not let it go, Ryan won't let it go. These movies are coming out at the same time, premiering at the same time, and at the premiere of Deadpool, he approaches Justin's talent agency, WME, and starts badmouthing Justin, calling him a sexual predator. They don't do anything about it at the time, so he comes to them again, demanding that they drop him. Once he realizes that even after she got absolutely everything she wanted, he was still not safe. So he did what he could to protect himself. He hired a crisis PR company. Now, Jennifer Abel, who'd been working with them, but she had been working under Jones Works, who we've spoken about earlier. And we saw in the earlier episodes that she ended up leaving Jones Works. And that once she was no longer employed, she had to hand over her phone back to Stephanie Jones. She didn't get a chance to clear it all out. There was security there. It was all very aggressive. So all of her communications during this time were on that phone. And this sets off more lawsuits in the end, because Stephanie files a lawsuit claiming that Jennifer Abel and crisis manager Nathan had set up a smear campaign. And Justin alleges that Stephanie is the one who took this information to Blake. But I don't know if that has been proven yet. And the timing of all this is the same time that Blake's getting criticized for her tone-deaf interviews and her tone-deaf promotions of the movie on her Instagram. So naturally, Blake thinks that people don't organically dislike her, that people aren't organically offended by her actions. It must be because of Justin, Abel, and Nathan. And now from these messages that are left on Jennifer Abel's phone, and these are the ones that Blake has access to suddenly, mysteriously. How did she get them if they were not from Stephanie? These messages turn up on her complaint, but they're doctored. Some of them aren't doctored. Some of them are just clipped to not show the whole story or the whole context, and others are actually doctored. As this wraps up episode 3, How Blake Lively Stole the Show. And that will take us into our topic for episode 4. Until then, this is Cassidy O'Connell saying stay well and stay tuned.